Melissa Payne, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Great to have you back on. Great to see you. And I have to ask out of the chute here, did you get battered by the winds yesterday? Because I know you're in the foothills.
I know I was wondering the same thing. Well, I was actually down in Lone Tree yesterday and
wow.
inside a hospital, actually. So I couldn't hear anything. But when I came home last night, I could see there was a couple of trees down. Yeah. So I missed this huge event, I think.
Well, I'm glad for your own sake that you weren't buffeted around too badly, but those were incredible pictures and videos out of the Front Range yesterday.
Did you all get any of that or no? It wasn't in your path?
Yeah, here in Southwest Colorado, we got a pretty heavy storm come through. We had actually thunder snow overnight, which woke us all up and pretty wild stuff. But it sure seems like winter is getting off to a bumpy start here in Colorado. So, but
I know.
Yep. Well, we're not here for the weather.
Nothing like this.
Yeah. Yeah. We're here.
Although that does play a big part of the book. So
okay.
It's during a huge snowstorm. So
maybe I inadvertently developed a segue without knowing it. By going for a cliche introduction, I came up with my own little intro. So drum roll, please. Let's get to it. Your brand new book. Well, I guess now it's been out for a little over a month and a half, 2 months.
Yes, it came out. The dates are all ahead, but I think it was October 19th. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're just coming up on 2 months. That's great. And it's your third book, I believe. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. Third book.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us all about it? It sounds like it's got a great concept premise here, and it's already receiving tremendous reviews on Amazon and other places.
Yeah. So it's called The Night of Many Endings, and it's came out on October 19th. And it's a book about 5 strangers stuck in a library during an epic Colorado snowstorm. So
there you go.
It was a nice segue.
Yeah.
And much of the inspiration for that snowstorm came from one that you might remember. I don't know what Southeast Colorado got from that. The storm of 2003. Where I lived, we got about 7 feet. And we were snowed in for a solid week. Did you get any?
Well, I only moved down here 2.5, 3 years ago, and I was there for 2003. Okay. I was there for 1983 as well, blizzard that just completely shut the whole Front Range down. I think it was May of 83, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in there. But 2003 is impossible to forget. And I was living in Congress Park at the time, and working for Denver Public Schools myself. And, I just remember the incredible, the cars didn't move. The roads were completely buried. Yeah.
Right. And we all remember it. And it creates those memories and those connections with people, with neighbors, with a lot of people you don't necessarily see every day, or you may get stuck with, and that you have nothing in common with, and then it creates story often. I'm sure, because we all have stories in those times.
Yeah, absolutely. So you didn't set it at that time. You just created a snowstorm for the current contemporary times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be I love elements, some of my writing, and I love settings and environment. And for this one, instead of the town, it's one of the characters, it was the storm.
And what town did you pick, or did you create a new one?
I created, sometimes fun gives you a little bit more license.
Yeah.
But, Ed, because of the library where it's set in, in my head, it was a little bit like a Manitou Springs, but, roughly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it got a little artsy scene. It's in the foothills near a big city, but not too far.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what happens in the library? Who gets stuck in there?
So this story is about strangers, about people. And the gist of it is that we can't really know another person until we learn their story first. And so libraries are community centers. And it serves types of people, from kids to teenagers, those who don't maybe have Wi-Fi at their home and want to use the computers or need a computer. It even touches on the homeless population. It touches on so many different kinds of people from all walks of life. And so it was a perfect setting for me to bring 5 very different people together to spend a night and then share their own stories and learn from each other. And in that, hopefully, there's change and growth for each of them.
Huh. So how did you cast this? You must have had, obviously you've got every option under the sun in terms of age and diversity. How did you go about that?
Well, I'll go back a little bit and tell you how I was inspired by this to write this book. And it kind of started with the librarian, Nora. But I am a huge podcast listener. I love podcasts. I love documentaries. I love just learning about people, and particularly through the pandemic and COVID. Sometimes that was the way I could learn new stories because we weren't interacting on a personal level. And I missed that as a writer. I was like desperate for more interaction with people. So I really jumped into any kind of a podcast that taught me something, or a documentary that would teach me something. And so and this was before actually COVID, but I was listening to a TED Talk, and it was given by a librarian who worked at an inner city library. And she was talking about the opioid epidemic and how it was affecting public libraries, from homeless folks, people experiencing homelessness who were coming into the library, that were happening inside and outside. And she to address that. So what she had, in her, a little bit of her backstory was that both of her parents had been addicts themselves, and experienced that on a very personal level. But so she just get trained on the use of Narcan, which is a nasal spray that reverses the effects of an overdose. And so in her life, she had, as a librarian, worked with kids on projects, helped people find books, and had also gone outside and saved lives. And ask her, why would you do this? Because we know from experience, some of these people are just going to come the same thing all over again. Right. And she said, because somebody gave that chance to my parents, and her parents were all sober. And she said, and I want to be that chance else.
Wow.
That gave me chills when I heard it. And I just thought it was such a beautiful illustration of how people help each other, and how our stories don't reflect at times our drive and what we want to do. And for this librarian, it's really touched me. And so that was the inspiration for my character, Nora. And Nora is a librarian in this small Colorado town. And she has a brother who she's lost to addiction. It was an accident. He just kind of went down this path of guilt and very difficult life. And she feels so guilty because she survived this accident. Both did, but they lost their parents because of it. And her whole life up to this point, when the book starts, has been trying her brother get sober. She spent basically so much of her own life to help him. And she doesn't realize it. And so that's where we start in this story. And from that, then other characters develop. Lewis, a man, older, experiencing homelessness and addiction himself. Nora saves him that night and brings him into the library. I have Marlene, an elderly woman with a very narrow view of the world. And she was a very difficult one for me to write, actually, like the way she interacted with the characters. And then Vlado, the security guard, and troubled teen.
And do you rotate perspectives, or do you stick with Nora? How did you go about that?
I used 3 main perspectives: Marlene, the elderly, Nora, the librarian, and Lewis, the older man experiencing homelessness.
Wow. I mean, I love the inspiration, just the fact that you're out there consuming stories and consuming information. And you just, I feel that you really just had an aha moment. Like that was just you knew instantly you had something that would be worthy of a novel length treatment, right?
Hope you do.
Yeah.
As a writer, get those inspirations, and then comes the harder part of figuring out how to create these characters, how they interact, what's the point of the story. And this one is it's a quieter story. It's really about these interactions in the dark. They lose power.
Oh,
They don't
wow.
have food.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
So writing these scenes in remembering they're in the dark, but it did help because oftentimes with people, when we see each other, we make observations, we make judgments.
Mm.
And especially with a homeless person, kind of a bitter woman, an elderly bitter woman, the security guard, the young girl, and the librarian, visually, they can all make a lot of opinions about it. They can form opinions quickly. And with taking away the dark, putting them kind of in a situation where they had to rely on one another, I think then could allow them to open their eyes to each other and their hearts in a different way.
Do they encounter each other at all before the storm and or before the darkness settles in?
Some of them know each other. Yeah,
Okay.
there's familiarity between a few of them.
Okay.
But some of them are just people you know of or you could see every day in a town, but not really know them.
And it all takes place in that one night.
Yes, the majority of the book does, and then you get to, there's a bit of time afterwards too.
Yeah. Wow. So big challenge there too, as well, just to compress everything into one evening. You hadn't done that before? I assume that the other books have a more traditional pace to them.
Yeah, well, memories was the thing that kind of kept me hemmed in on that one, was her inability to form new memories.
Yeah.
And so maybe I like being constrained in some way as a writer. I would say Stone's was a little bit more freer in terms of the pacing and everything. But definitely when you write something that it happens in one night, it's in one place, and then you take away certain things like heat, light, it does challenge, was challenge writer to figure out, well, then why would I want to keep reading this as a reader? What is it that I'm trying to do here? What are these characters what am I hoping to accomplish with these characters?
Yeah.
So it is a challenge, but it was a fun one. I liked it. And I wrote it during the pandemic, this particular story. And it was very cathartic for me.
That's great. As a pandemic did not shut down your creative process. Some writers have said that they really just found themselves unable to produce words during the pandemic, and others just kept cranking.
As you know, I had a deadline.
Yeah.
And so I was fortunate to have that deadline.
Yeah.
Because it forced me to have to sit down every day and produce.
Yep. So you mentioned your other two novels. What are the connections are you finding thematically that you're exploring across all three?
People. I enjoy having to learn about people and their lives and interactions. I'd like to say my life was interesting enough to just write about everything I know, but it's not. And I find, like I said, when I read books, I want to read about characters that I don't know. I want to see, or a character that seems like I would know this person, and then find their life is totally different from mine. I want to read about stories and situations and see in real life, nonfiction and fiction. That's why I love podcasts and documentaries. I find great inspiration from others.
I find myself really getting stuck with my own little bank of podcasts, my own little routines about where I'm going for information and new ideas. Do you push yourself to try new podcasts, new books? Do you go into a library, whether it's virtually or at the physical library, and just force yourself down new aisles in search of something different?
Yeah, and this is where I use kind of, whether it's social media or just talking to someone face to face, I usually always ask, what's your favorite podcast? For a podcast, or what new, like you're going to ask me what book I'm reading. Yeah. What book are you reading right now? Or if it's on social media, then I'm following people who are different from me, and I'm seeing what are they doing? What are they saying? Who are they reading? How can I expand what I read and who I read? So I can expand my own viewpoints and my own experience life through others.
So this is a real conscious part of your day, or maybe it's to the point now where this is just routine for you to know that every part of your day is going to be to push yourself in and pull yourself in new directions.
Well, if I feel as though as a person, if I want, and a writer, if I want to keep creating characters and stories, I have to understand and take the time to learn about people myself. So this story, The Night of Many Endings, was actually very personal to me because it's something I believe that in life we should be doing. We should be, I mean, we don't all have the time to stop at the grocery store and learn, the cashier's story. But that is one example. Maybe you do one day. Maybe you start up a conversation and hey, you learn something new about that person and they learn something new about you. It is something I think about. It's kind of a running, because I think what it helps is it helps us develop empathy.
Right. Right.
I think that so much more positive interactions happen when we can have true empathy. And it's not easy to do when people are very different. Personally, I think that's right now in our world, we need more of it. And we need more of an ability to really try to understand other people who think differently, believe differently. And so there's a little bit of a personal thing in there for me, for sure. But I also think it makes more interesting characters and more interesting reading. And certainly as a writer, it challenges me.
Yeah, it is hard. You mentioned your narrow-minded character and just the struggle to put somebody on the page that may not be an easy choice, may not be an easy person to embody yourself as you get inside that head. That does create a real challenge. You probably can feel it as you write, that this is good for even you as a writer to be pushing yourself. If it's too easy, it's probably not good fiction, possibly.
Right. And the point with Marlene was that even someone like on face value, when you listen to her, you think, what a horrible, why would you say those things? Why would you think those things? But Marlene has a story. And Marlene, and it also doesn't mean that when she learned others, that she couldn't change her select on her own choices. And I don't want to change her. I didn't want to change her and say, see, now she's changed completely. I wanted to show a shift, a nuanced shift in her that came from interact, and also help to see, why is she like this way? How did she develop into this person? And then to understand her better too. So, she ended up being one of my favorites because it took a lot to get into her head. And like I said, she didn't play well with the other characters all the time. And sometimes I was very surprised at the things she would say. I didn't like it. But it was true to her.
Huh. Interesting. Are you, and I've probably asked you this before, but I forget, do you go in, just put your characters in motion and see where it goes, or do you write an outline first?
I definitely outline, but that outline changes. I was actually just talking to a writer friend of mine on my next book, and I have just come to a realization that I have added 2 characters who really are unnecessary. And there were pretty major threads to this story. But what I've done was taken this one main character. I think sometimes you're almost afraid to get to their main character too much. You're almost a little afraid of them. And so you create other characters to like a character or their story deeper. And what I realized was, no, that's her story. Why am I story through these other 2 characters? It's a really tough realization because it doesn't fit with my outline. It mostly fits with my outline, but now I have to shift. And that's what I find. It's good to outline because it gives me a pretty general sense of where I want to go. But then I do the characters to speak for themselves. And if a story is telling me and the characters are telling me as I'm writing it, that it's not working. And I had the idea with this one, I just said to my friend, it's not working. Something's clunky, something's off. And she asked a question and boom, I realized what I had done. And so I would say for me, it's a blend.
Yeah. So good time to ask you just for a little teaser on what the next book is.
The next book is, I'm never good at explaining my new books in 2 sentences. That takes a lot of work for me. But the next book is again about the family we find or the family we create. That's a theme that I would say I love. I love the idea of community and family. So this one is similar. It is set in southeastern Ohio, where I lived for a number of years. And so it's a slightly different setting, but again, mountains. I love mountains of all kinds. And it starts with a woman who lands in this small town called Crystal, Ohio, with a baby and a story. So you'll get more next year.
Okay. All right. That's great.
That comes out November of 2022.
Oh, great. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're really on a schedule. Is that part of a new contract, or do you know anything beyond that? Are you under contract farther
With
out?
like more, no,
Yeah.
I am right now in this part of my career. I do like the one book at a time.
Yeah.
I can focus on that one book. I can give it all my attention, but it also lets me have periods of time where I can breathe and do other things.
Yeah.
Like I said, once you turn it in, you have a little bit of free time, and that could be developing your next book. That could be marketing. That could be just different things that I can focus on. So I do like that schedule. And so far that's working for me
That's great.
and for
Well,
my publisher too.
yeah. Well, and I was just about to ask if you would just share a little bit about Lake Union and
Mm-hmm.
what your experience has been with them. One thing I admire, just looking at you and several other RMFW folks who are with Lake Union and poking around a little bit, boy, they know how to find their readers and they know how to find you readers. Tons and tons of reviews online. I don't know if you put a lot of value in just getting all those reviews, but it must feel good. I think Memories in the Drift has, I don't know how many thousand reviews now. That must feel good to know you're finding readers and getting a reaction. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. They Lake Union has been amazing to work with. They are responsive to shifts in the market. I feel like they're more responsive than reactive. So, and they are very good at getting the readers who are going to enjoy your story. I've had a wonderful relationship with my editor. They also work with authors along the process, and I have always felt that the story that I want to tell is the one they're going to help me tell.
Mm.
There's agenda of, why don't you tell this kind of a story, or why aren't you, and they've hooked me up with the people who enjoy these stories, which is difficult. I'm not a series writer, so each book is its own thing. And that is more difficult because it definitely, each book appeals to slightly different audiences. But to date, I am happy with who it's reached, and it does seem to be reaching the right readers, which is always, as an author, I love when it feels like your book landed in just the right hands.
Yeah.
The person who was because not everyone's gonna enjoy our stories. So that's okay.
Right.
But I love when the right people pick up your book and then they tell you about it too. I hadn't heard of this before, and this touched me, or I learned something new here. And that's very gratifying, very fulfilling as an author. So Lake Union, I just have felt that's been a really nice partnership. And yeah, it's been a great ride so far.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Wow. And just to give folks a little bit of an idea, you've got 3 books out in the last 3 years, or 3 or 4. Yep. And
yes, last 3 years. 2019 was Stones. Yep.
Yeah. And so, and the number 4 coming out in less than 12 months from now. But you've been writing for a while before all this happened, right?
I started out on my career path, let's see, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I think, gosh. So it was a midlife kind of shift, but I've always loved writing. That has never been something that has been a chore for me. I love expressing my thoughts through words. So to be able to create worlds that for readers has been just such an amazing gift, honestly, to have the time to do it and to be able to make it into a career. So I have another book I wrote when I was first starting out, queried it, went through all that process, editing, querying, and queried 99 agents. So don't give up. And they were all no's. I mean, some of them were like, I think I had maybe 20 submissions request and a few revise and resubmit, but ultimately they were all no's. And in the process of that, I started writing another book, which was Stones, The Secrets of Lost Stones. And I just learned to just keep pegging away, just keep going. And that is always my advice to people who ask, what would be your advice to someone who wants to do this? Just keep writing. And it's such an annoying thing to hear.
Yeah.
But it is just so true. And to see success in the failure, I had to see all those no's as a way to learn. And not that they all say no, and here's why. Usually it's a no, thank you. But you have to just carve your way through that and say, okay, well, what can I do? Join a critique group, join a writing group, just surround yourself with other authors and read.
Yep.
And when I submitted Stones and I got an agent, and then I was able to hook up with a publishing house, then it's just as hard. It's not easier. We want to say like we've arrived. No, it's just as hard. So you are earning your chops in that period of time, however long it takes, months to years, of trying to get published. Those are you're earning your chops. So it's a valuable part of the process, because I have had to pull on that reserve a lot in the publishing part of it. It is not easy to publish books, to come up with new stories, to worry about contracts, to have reviews, to have people reach out who didn't love your books. You have to be tough through all of that, and to persevere through it. I think that the early stages of failure serve us well.
Yeah. And just to touch on that point, I guess it's really important that you hear, just keep writing, just as you say, you hear that all the time. And I think some writers think, well, I'll just keep kind of writing the same thing I've always written if I just keep writing. I think it's just keep writing and be open to learning about what you really need to be getting feedback on your work and listening carefully to what you're hearing from trusted readers who can tell you what's working and what's not.
Absolutely. Don't hang on to it so tight that we're too scared to get feedback because we think it means we're not good. It is okay to not be good. It's okay to have to redo a story. I do it all the time because I'm about to do it now. And it's okay. And I'll tell you, on a personal note, as you know, my father has been in the hospital, has been very ill, and I have a deadline looming. All of that writing and all of that pushing through very hard personal, like times before where I was just like, I'll never make it, I'll never get a book published, is serving me now on a very personal side where I have to push through tougher times. I have had to ask for an extension on my deadline, which I hate to do, but I've learned I have to do this.
Right.
And that is serving me well now. So like you're saying, the time is purposeful, and it's okay. It's okay to be critiqued. It's okay to feel like you didn't measure up, because your next time you write, you'll improve.
I can't think of anything in life that you are good at right out of the chute, whether it's cooking or skiing or shooting a rifle or being a runner, or even just being a good jogger. I mean, the first time you go for a jog, you're not going to run 5 miles, but so everything takes practice.
And I hope I'm writing when I'm 80, and I hope that book is better than the one that I wrote yesterday. I just hope I continue to learn. I don't see this as ever a process where I'm done, or I've reached some zenith of here I am. No, I feel like it will always be, because I change as a person, which will change my writing, at least my characters. I hope it makes everything richer, and my stories might change too with the years. But I'm happy about that, and I hope that makes me a better writer.
Wow, fantastic! You really seem like you savor the process, and you are. I can just feel that you're grateful to be in the situation you're in, and it sounds like that attitude was there even before you got an agent, before you got published.
Yeah, but I've cried along the way. I've been angry. Let me be real here. This is not also, I'm not this, I'm not like this all the time, but you learn it, and it's messy and chaotic, and it can be really ugly, and that's okay too.
Yeah. Because we're human beings, and it's the human system. Yeah. Very good. Well, congratulations on book 3. Look forward to book 4. And let's see, we just always like to give our guests a chance to pay it forward. And as you mentioned, that you will provide for us a suggestion or a hint of what you're reading now and paying it forward a little bit. So now's your chance.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to share two, because I usually always have a fiction and nonfiction book going.
Great.
The one I'm reading fiction, I'm a big Alice Hoffman fan. I love her stories. I love her writing. So it's The Red Garden. I have to remember the titles of books. Okay. The Red Garden by Alice Hoffman. But I just read, and this is a local author, Erica Armstrong. It's called A Chick in the Cockpit. And she was a pilot. And she kind of talks about her life as a female pilot, one of the few female pilots. It also touches on domestic abuse. Her story is powerful and really touched me. So again, that one was Erica Armstrong, A Chick in the Cockpit.
Wow. I think I saw her interviewed on a news station up there at some point. And that was a really compelling little interview. Yeah, that sounds great.
Actually just met her. She lives in my community, and I was at a book club they were discussing my book, and she was there. And I said, she goes, Melissa Payne. I said, Erica Armstrong, I have heard about you for years, because we're writers. People will be like, do you know Erica Armstrong? I'm like, I don't. And so it was really neat to finally meet her in person. And then and then I read her book, and I was really touched by it. She has a neat story.
Wow. Excellent. Wow. Very cool. You don't happen to have a copy of your book handy so we can see the cover?
I do.
There you go. And a great cover it is. That's fantastic.
Oh, yes. Yeah. You'll be happy. Lake Union does amazing covers, I think.
That's great. Awesome. Melissa Payne, thank you so much. As always, great to have you. And we will catch up with you again real soon down the road.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark. It was so nice. And good luck to you in your publishing journey.
Thank you.